Welcome to this video about the Care Act duties on information and advice. Please note that we have other videos about this topic on the Sky website, alongside other resources and a handout with key messages and reflective questions to support embedding the learning. My name is Paula and with me today is Kevin. In the previous videos around the duty of information and advice, we explored how information and advice plays a crucial role in relation to our other duties, such as those around preventing the need for care and support. And we explored how care and support isn't just about the provision of traditional services, but how information and advice is a really important element under the umbrella of care and support and can help in relation to preventing the needs of individuals from developing, and also enables us to support a person in terms of their individual well-being under the 9 areas as described by the Care Act.
I think I went to a very interesting one time. It was about sort of direct payments, and at that time there was one of the charities that was providing information on how to manage that and how to run that. And I think maybe earlier on we might have considered that. Later on, when my father was older and I was older as well, in lots of ways, that we just no, it's too much management, even with that offer. But there's a big area as well about how, can you or would you cope with a direct payment or a health personal budget in that way. And I think that's a conversation that probably should be taken very delicately, but should be encouraged. And the big area there is that my dad and I cared for my mum. That's family. We had a wider family than that, and that all these things should be done in the context of the family. Yeah, and done that, because there might be someone in the group that could manage that and would be happy to manage that, but doesn't do the personal care side of it or whatever. So these it is a family unit. That's what we and doesn't always feel that way. It doesn't.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I might go off topic here a little bit, but the Care Act does tell us that when we're working with individuals, that we do take a whole family approach, and that we do look at the contribution that that can be offered to an individual with needs, whether assessed needs or eligible needs. But I think that's a beautiful thing, but I do think sometimes as well it's frowned upon, because people are thinking, oh, local authority are just wanting to save money and casting it onto family members so we don't have to pay for it, social care don't have to pay for it. But actually it's not about that. It's about looking at those family networks and what's important to the individual and how we can contribute together. You said it, it's a family unit. We've all got different things that we can do to contribute to the health and well-being of our loved one, and it is about exploring that. So you mentioned around direct payments, and this is another area where it's important that information is provided on a website, on a leaflet, whatever, because it is one of the opportunities that an individual can take if they're assessed to have eligible needs and putting a care and support plan together. So a local authority has got a responsibility to provide that information around what is an assessment, how do we interpret what a need is, using the framework of the Care Act. What happens if I do get assessed and have eligible needs? What does a care and support plan mean? And what does that care and support plan, what is it going to look like for me? How is it going to work for me? And so we do need to be providing accessible information around direct payments, around individual service funds, around managed services, because then that is supporting an individual to be able to see what choices they've got and to be able to make an informed decision. So again, as a social care practitioner, I need to have that knowledge so that if I'm having a conversation and you, Kevin, said, oh, direct payments might work for me, what does that mean? Then I can provide that information and explore with you how it might work and what steps might need to happen again moving forward.
So one of the other sources of information I know we have here is we have an online directory, and I've used that for other people and gone online. It's there's a lot of information there. There's a lot. I haven't always been able to find what I want.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know really why. The search engines aren't always that great. You know what you type in and what you get. If you don't know what you don't know what you need to know. How are you going to
Yeah.
find what you need to know through that? And the telephone support lines are similar in the senses they only have access to the same data in most cases. So I really don't know what the answer is to that. But what I have seen in working with social prescribers, community navigators as we call them, link workers as they're called now, because they are on the ground and they are doing a lot of that, which the average social care practitioner may not be, or they might have a specific area they're knowledgeable about, not another. That they do seem to have an access to a lot of information that even these central directories don't seem to have access to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a key thing there is about making sure as a social care practitioner we're asking the right sorts of questions so we know what information might be useful to that person, and I think that is a key thing. But we do have lots of information in our heads that that needs to be shared at the time that it's relevant and appropriate to the person. So yeah, so in terms of the information that needs to be provided. So we've identified we need to provide information around what we can do to prevent, reduce and delay needs. We need to provide information around what the adult care process looks like and the different touch points that an individual might have with a person. But it's also about providing information not just about traditional services, so domiciliary support in the home or residential or nursing care. It's about providing information for individuals where they might be having a bit of difficulty managing the maintenance of their home, and so providing a list of handy persons telephone numbers that the individual can get in contact with them by themselves so that they can get that support that's needed. That's not, they don't need to come into contact with adult social care to get that, but local authorities do have a responsibility to kind of make that information available as well. We also do need to remember that under the Care Act, we have a duty to safeguard individuals that are at risk of or subjected to abuse and neglect. So we need to be making sure that there is information. There is information around what a person can do if they have a concern about somebody, and to have people there that they can have a conversation with to discuss that concern there. Okay.
So on that one, we were when my mother could walk before she lost her mobility, we had concerns about whether we could or we couldn't lock her in for our own safety.
Yeah.
And keep we wouldn't probably have to take the key out of the house even because she wouldn't find it. Really, she wouldn't know where to look for it. But that has got a safeguarding issue, you could say. And somebody said to me once, well, what would happen if the house burned down? Like, oh, thanks for that. That's really helpful. That's really helpful. That is. But I actually heard recently that a gentleman that had done that has got an appointment in court for a deprivation of liberty of his spouse with dementia, and I was told, oh, nobody would do anything about that. Of course they wouldn't. Who would do that? Well, this gentleman is having to go through that, and is that proportionate? Is that helpful? I'm not sure what they are hoping to achieve with that.
Yeah, that's a good point to highlight, Kevin, about how when we're providing information and advice, we need to be making sure it's lawful, because you were told that no one would do anything about it, but then of an individual who is facing judicial proceedings. So while this video and this series of videos is around the Care Act, I think you've just provided an opportunity for me to remind social care practitioners that we don't work under the Care Act in isolation of other fundamental frameworks such as the Mental Capacity Act. And so any advice or information that we are providing has to be based in fact and not personal opinion, okay? So provision of information and advice duties are there to promote individual well-being in accordance with those 9 areas specified in the Care Act. And while the Care Act duties do extend to people that are in prison, social care practitioners must ensure that it's not through our practice that people end up there.
Yeah, on many occasions, Dad and I were told not necessarily by social care practitioners, but by that community, that they wouldn't do that. You won't get in any trouble.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Kevin, as well, to just reiterate that it's not just adult social care that has to, provide factual information and advice. It's anybody that is working with health, within health and social care.
The other one that comes to mind is that our living room ended up being my mum's bedroom, and we did get access to a reduction in the tax. My dad and my mum were living there on their own. They did get the single person's reduction. I believe our social workers said that didn't really know that and said that it was outside their scope of information or something. I can't remember how it was, but not sure how that fits into what you're sharing today.
Yeah, again, it is. When we're looking at benefits, it is outside of our duties under the Care Act in terms of meeting needs and eligible duties. However, we do have a duty to provide information and advice with regards to a person's individual well-being. So, it's about saying, right, I'm not quite sure about that because that's not my area of concern. Let me find out for you and come back to you. Or this is a telephone number for the benefits helpline. Can you give them a ring, or do you think that you'll need a bit more additional support? So it's like we said in the last video, it's no good just giving information and signposting you somewhere else. It's about saying, okay, this service might support you. Can you manage to get there yourself, or do you need something? So yeah, it might not be within our area of control, but we do still have a responsibility to have the right conversation. Okay. So thank you very much for your time, Kevin. And please remember that we do have other resources and videos in relation to the Care Act and in particular to information and advice. So please go and check that out. Thank you very much.
Thank you.